Welcome, ladies, to the Real Estate Investor Show, providing inspiration, strategies, and insight to empower women investors to live balanced and financially free lives. Now, here are your co-hosts, Liz and Andressa.
Today, we had the pleasure of interviewing Diana George. She's from Oakland, California. She's just a powerhouse women investor. We cover so many different things with Diana today. One thing that was huge was she shared how she's able to take her power back. We allow, in a lot of ways, things to, swarm in our heads and get overwhelmed and always sometimes feel like we're spiraling because we're women investors. We're doing a lot of things in our life. We wear a lot of hats. And she just gave some specific yet powerful strategies on how to really take your power back and feel empowered.
I love that. She also gave a lot of information, more specifically about the data that is out there that we don't use in order for us to make sure we are purchasing the right thing and we are rehabbing or not over or under rehabbing a property. You cannot miss this episode, and I'm so excited for you guys to meet her.
Enjoy the episode, investors. Welcome back, ladies. This is Liz.
And this is Andressa.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Investor Show, where we're totally up to inspiring, empowering, helping women live financially free and balanced lives. So
Amen.
We have a phenomenal guest on our show this week. Hi, Diana.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to jump into your story and all the great things you're up to today and all the neat projects you guys are involved in. And as we like to just, thank everyone for listening. And we also like to share kind of what's up for us. So Andressa, what's going on? Well, where do I begin?
What happened?
But that's not the purpose of the podcast this week. We just got back, as you know, we just got back from a really inspiring conference called She's Unstoppable.
Yes.
And you couldn't help just be inspired by being there, right? I don't think there was anyone in the audience. It was like 500 women that attended this conference, all for real estate agents, women real estate agents. And you just left there really feeling very inspired. And one of the things I took away, I took a lot, but one of the things I took away was, how are you unstoppable? Because, when we think of like being unstoppable, right? We can be like, okay, what does that look like? But it looks differently for everyone.
Yeah.
And we all get stopped in different ways. So something that's been coming up for me since we've been there last week is I've really been thinking like, where do I get stopped? Where do I sometimes, am I not unstoppable? Right.
Right.
So, and one thing that I realized was sometimes when I'm moving into something new, it's a new area for me. Things I'm confident I can roll with, I feel unstoppable. But the things that sometimes are new or unfamiliar to me, I start to make excuses, right? I start to like in my head go, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that. I'm like, hold on. Am I being unstoppable in this area? So that came up for me. So, where do I get stopped? And then how do I become really unstoppable in all areas of life, right? So just wanted to share that. I think, women listening, where do you get stopped? Because we're all unstoppable in certain areas of our life. It's not like I'm not an unstoppable person. Well, you probably are unstoppable in something. On some level, right? But there are areas that we sometimes don't feel that energy. So what comes up for you? We all have different stuff we have to work through. So
Liz, I'm going to put you on the spot, all right?
All right.
Just saying.
How much time do we have?
No, 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Whoa.
But here's the thing. When that happens, when you feel that you're getting stuck, what did you find out? Or what's the solution? What's the trick that you got to get out of your own head? What have you been doing in order for you to continue growing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what I thought, and it was actually on I ran this morning and it was on my run. I was thinking about something and then I started to feel like I was stopping myself, right? Mm-hmm. So what I did in that moment was actually, and this is a great tool for the women listening, is connect with the area that you are unstoppable. So you do have that confidence, right? So when you feel like you're getting stopped on something and in some area, you do have confidence that you can pull from other areas. Like, no, I did run a marathon. I trained for a marathon. Okay. I wasn't unstoppable. I was unstoppable there. So that same perseverance, energy, what you have can be applied to that area that you're feeling stopped. Okay, I did that. How can I put that same energy into this thing that I think I don't know if I can do? So that's a great question. We didn't even plan that. That's wonderful.
Look at us.
Look at us.
So proud.
Oh, geez. Well, thank you for
Love
that.
that. Of course.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was a great question. I always appreciate your directness. So
There we go.
So Diana, without further ado, we really want to jump into your story. You have so many, we have so many awesome questions to ask you. Hopefully we get to all of them. So for you though, what, let's take it from, the beginning for you. What inspired you? What propelled you to get involved in real estate investing? And I know you've been involved in a lot of different types of real estate businesses. So yeah, what inspired you to get involved?
I started back in '03, and the thinking back then was, I wanted to go into real estate, but I just didn't know at what capacity. And when I started getting into real estate, the market had a huge crash 5 years later. And at that point, I built a pretty good business. I then moved on. I started seeing a lot of companies do rehabs. That was a big thing in Oakland at the time. There was Waypoint Homes, which is now this $1 billion hedge fund. And at the time they were just a $10 million fund, and we were in competition with them. I was at a little $10 million fund named McKinley. And I just really loved the idea of taking something old and dilapidated and then making it beautiful, and then having the neighbors walk up and thank you, and adding that value to a neighborhood. And then it just became something that just grew in me. I wanted to make a business out of it, and just, continue grow it, taking it to other levels like development. And so I really just wanted to grow, and we joke around, like, create the fempire. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where it's kind of where it all began. I've always had this passion for real estate, and especially on the investment side of things. Having parents that were immigrants too, I mean, that's something we always learned was, real estate is where you make your money. And so growing up, I was always kind of ingrained. And then having a passion for it obviously helped, because it doesn't feel like I'm working, even though, I'm working like every day, all day.
And you had your own brokerage. So you started a brokerage in your early 30s. Tell us a bit about that, because then that kind of propelled you to get involved in the role you're in now.
Yeah. So when I left the equity group, I started a brokerage focused on investors, because the number one thing at the time, I would go to these meetups. The largest meetup is by Dean Haga and Joe Metz out here. And their number one complaint is that agents didn't know how to pitch investment deals.
Yes.
And it's still till this day. And unfortunately, it's not, not all agents are intentional or malicious in this way, but some of them just honestly don't know how to run comps. And so, or they just don't know, like, oh, if I went over this freeway, now I'm in a completely different district, and now the houses are going up 200 grand or they're below 200,000. So there's a lot of little factors when we underwrite files. But with the brokerage, I focused it solely on investors. And then it kind of grew into retail market, like listing other people's homes and buyers. But that kind of exceeded my wildest dreams. We were just a small little brokerage of 5 of us, and then we grew to 36. And then we were creating our own inventory we became the investor real estate group. We would just get phone calls from investors in the neighborhood saying, hey, if you find something, let me know. Back in those days, between 2011 and 2016, I would say MLS was where you found all your deals. So, and then we just kind of grew from there. And I was approached to sell a brokerage, which I did, because I really wanted to focus on my development company, because that's truly where my end game was always focused on.
So you grew from 5 people to 36 people. In terms of the team. Okay. And the other thing you said, so that's an interesting conversation. That would be awesome to get into for a moment here too, in terms of building teams. Also, you mentioned the idea of a niche. And I think often people, I know Andres and I, when we started this podcast, right? So we were like, we got to really focus on what who do we want to serve? And to your point, it sounded like that was a recipe for your success in terms of really getting focused. It sounded like it grew into other things, but you started and really focused in on this niche of investors. So early on, did you really stay committed to that? Did you say, okay, this is our niche, this is who we want to serve, and this is it? Or did you start to open that up a little bit? I'm curious to hear that, because I think there's a big conversation out there around, and that could be applying to so many different aspects of real estate investing around niches and focus. So I'm curious, how did you navigate that, especially when you were growing? And you clearly did something very successfully to grow 5 times your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because as human beings, we get so distracted and we just kind of, our brains go everywhere. And my primary focus was, I knew that's something I was good at. And then I taught it to my agents. And then it was something where we really kind of marketed to that specific niche. And then, some agents love the investor stuff, and other agents were like, yeah, this is not really my thing. And they kind of went into retail market. So we had 3 different revenue streams coming in versus most brokerages just working with your typical listing and your buyer. We were creating our own inventory, because our whole thing was, if we find you the home, you have to give it back to us at a full 6%. And a lot of times these investors were so grateful from the margins they were making.
Yeah.
They would send us bonus checks. And I mean, it was like, wow, really? So I really, the number one thing I do when I try to like really zoom in and focus on something is, I'm kind of old school, and it's cathartic for me, but I love to write. So I'll write my business plan and then I type it out. So I kind of do it old school that way. And I feel when you write it, it just really ingrains it in your subconscious. And as we all know, your subconscious controls 90% of what you do on a daily basis. So I always try to plant those positive seeds in the subconscious. Another book that really helped me out was Simon Sinek, Know Your Why, which has now become so popular. When I first heard about him, I saw him on a TED Talks, and I loved how he kind of went backwards. So he took his ultimate goal and then slowly went backwards. Like, how am I going to get to this goal? But went backwards doing that. And I love that, because I tend to be a big picture person. They say there's 2 kinds of people, right? You have your big picture people and your detail people. And I tend to be big picture when I think of things, but then how do I get detailed? And so that really helped me focus on the details of how do I get to that point.
Yeah. Well, there's so many questions that just pop in my head while you're talking. Awesome. And then I was like, oh my gosh, which one should I get first? But I think that where I'm going to go is just, so as Liz mentioned, we went to this conference for real estate agents. And a lot of people on our Facebook community were asking, like, why are you going to a conference for real estate agents? You guys are investors, developers, whatever. And we're like, we feel that there is a gap in between the real estate agent community and the investor community. And they don't communicate. They just like, well, I don't know your area, and vice versa. I was extremely surprised to talk to so many amazing ladies there that are doing great things. And they're saying, well, I get all those leads. And I was like, what do you do with that? Well, I just list them. Or I was like, number one, I think that that's great that you can list them, but what are the other possibilities, right? You can talk to us investors that will be like ongoing clients, and you can have that, income coming in. You can partner up with so many investors. I mean, you guys bring so much to the table, and we were not understanding why they were not seeing all those other possibilities. And you guys are just saying that you were able to grow your business because you guys had different types of streams of income. But my point is, what was stopping them to see it? And I think that you made the connection about your unconscious. right?
Yeah.
A lot of them don't even cross their mind that they can invest themselves, that there are other possibilities out there. So for your mindset perspective, when you start growing your business and then you did the transition to the investment side, what were the challenges that you were facing during that time?
Because we were so new, I didn't have a portfolio at the time. I just had the portfolio from my previous job. And so it's scary because you're asking people to trust you and come in. And a lot of people got burned because a lot of agents can run comps in a way that is manipulative
Yeah.
and makes it look good. But at the end of the day, and back then investors, I don't think are as savvy as they are now. Now there's so many tools and there's so many educational products. Back then, it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. We didn't have all those shows. So I think one of the things that definitely, helped us was, what I was saying earlier is Dean and Joe have probably one of the biggest investor meetups here in the Bay Area. And I reached out and spoke with Dean, and I found them a house in Berkeley, and it ended up making them $100,000. But it was pulling teeth in the beginning because they didn't know me from Adam, and they're like, we don't know who this woman is, and all we know is she's starting a real estate company focused on investors. But once I was able to prove myself and then send them more deals, they have a very abundant mentality, and they shared with me with their they started sharing me with their network, and then I started doing speaking engagements, and then it just kind of exploded. I had agents I started rehabbing myself, and then people were like, okay, well, she's a rehabber and she's a real estate agent, so she totally gets it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that helps tremendously too, because people can relate to you. It's kind of, I remember when I started out, it was hard for buyers to work with me because I didn't own a home, like I was a 25-year-old, I didn't own a home at the time. So it's, okay, well, you don't own a house. So how are you going to help us buy a house? And some people do have that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
They just do.
Mm-hmm.
And investors are a little bit more rigid in that thinking. And I think what was really cool is watching my agents on my team start investing and start rehabbing their own homes. And
Nice.
when the community starts seeing that, they're like, okay, wow, you guys know how to pick a house. So it got to the point where we were getting bombarded, which was a beautiful thing. But it does blow my mind. You're right. There is still a major disconnect. And that was something that I saw. I was like, how do I bridge this gap? And it like I said, it exceeded my wildest dreams, but it's still something the investor community craves till this day.
Yeah.
Another piece with our marketing is when my agents did mailers, if the people wouldn't, want to list their property on the retail market, then we could say, okay, well, we can find, we can buy it from you. Like we would advertise as if our agency was going to buy their home. And if they didn't want to sell to us because they thought, well, investors are low ballers, well, guess what? We have a broker license. We can also list your house. So
Right.
it played, that's the beauty of being an agent in this industry, is you could play on different avenues. If it doesn't work out on the rehab side, okay, then, I'll list your home. So there was just so many ways to make money. And it was so many ways to make our clients money, which was exciting too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you really had them in mind, right? This is your customer. You wanted to serve the investor. You were investors yourselves. And that, that really sounded like one of the best things you did in terms of really serving that serving Curious though, as we thinking about just a quick transition into renovating homes, right? Because you're mentioning that a little bit, and how you made one of your clients, $100,000, or you did, but the process, and certainly you helped make that happen. A lot of people talk about over improving. Well, they don't talk about it, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be talked about. Is the idea of like over improving or under improving property, and obviously it depends on. Are you in a luxury, is it a luxury style home? Is it a rental grade? Is it, what area are you in? There's so many different elements that make this, okay, what to do and how to make sure you don't put too much or too little into a renovation. So I'm curious though, because you're also in charge of acquisitions for your investment company. I mean, you probably get this, and you probably get this better than most people. So I'm curious, how do you assess, or how can, the women listening assess to ensure they're not, spending too much or spending too little, spending the right amount on what they need to accomplish? And obviously there's a lot of if, ands, or buts, market, all that kind of stuff. You're in California, we're on the East Coast, what have you. But I'm curious, how do you ensure for your own projects, the properties that you renovated and you have been doing, how do you make sure that happens?
So, I love that question because I'm asked that all the time. And it's so simple. I just go on MLS and I look at the data. And I think we underestimate how much data is on MLS. If I'm for example, if I'm in a luxury market, I already know what I have to spend on. I have to put a Miele or a Bosch dishwasher in that house, or I have to put a Sub-Zero refrigerator. If I'm in a mid-grade home, I like to do LGs. If I'm in a lower end rental, I'll do like Whirlpool or Amana. A lot of times you see people, like you said, they overspend or they underspend. I always look at MLS data, for example. So if I'm looking to buy a home in a certain market area, like the ones the 3 houses we just purchased, for example, I'll look at the comps and I'll say, okay, why did this house sell 150,000 like over everyone else? Why did this house set a precedent or break a record? And then I'll look at why other houses have just been sitting on a market. When in Oakland right now, our market it like went back up again. We went through a little bit of a lull, and now it's white hot again. And it's because we've had 4 companies out here in San Francisco say they're going to IPO. And then of course, interest rates went down. So it's kind of created market hype. But regardless of, buyer seller market, I always want to know, okay, what did this house do that they got 200,000 over asking, or 150,000 over asking, or in other markets, maybe it's 50 or 60K. And so I just look at market data. I don't try to reinvent the wheel. So if I see, oh, okay, they're doing these like artistic tiles now in the bathroom, or, oh, okay, they're doing this open concept, or, oh, they're doing double sliders to the backyard. How can I do that in my home? And I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I try to do things in a way where, okay, they obviously know their buyer. And so when you're an investor and you're rehabbing, you have to know who your buyer is in that market. If I'm in an area like for luxury, for example, too, Atherton is the #1 zip code and the most expensive zip code in the country. So, sometimes when agents list homes there, they do like these very flashy open houses. Whereas right now we have a luxury project in Hillsborough, which is more, they're not flashy at all. They're actually very to themselves and they don't want any of that flash. So it's really knowing who your buyer is and how to kind of appeal to that marketplace.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I always tell people I'm not a interior designer. So that's not my strength. However, my properties just look good because I look what worked for other people. And why spend time reinventing the wheel? Don't get me wrong. If we're talking a luxury or a high price property, I'll customize. I'll spend more time on the stuff and picking different types of tile. But I was telling people I use the same paint forever. And I get the same results over and over again. They say, oh, it feels so calm. I was like, yes, tranquil, calm. If you could see my video right now, you will see this is the paint on my wall that I use for everywhere. So you're making such a good point. Yeah. I think we have so much data that people don't idealize and don't use it for his own advantage. And you can calculate all your costs like right there. So for your development deals, one thing that you're talking about is like over improving and under improving. For the acquisition part, I'm always curious to understand what are your criteria? What do you look at in order to qualify a property and say, hey, this is a deal for me, or no, this is not a deal for me, and let me explain to you why? What are your criteria?
Yeah, again, it's like depends on the neighborhood, but the number one thing I see, so like if you're in an area like an urban area, for example, versus a suburb, urban areas are going to be louder, but still, obviously people do not like freeways. I stay away from freeways.
Yes.
I stay away from electrical towers. I've advised other investors to stay away from electrical towers, even if they're in these really high-end neighborhoods like Palo Alto. And I tell them, you're not going to make your money back. Trust me.
I also stay away from cemetery. I don't know you, but
oh yeah. It's funny because, again, yeah, you try to get the largest pool of buyers you can.
yeah.
And it's funny. We did one house near a cemetery, and the people that ended up buying it were ER nurses.
Okay.
Interesting.
They're like, oh, we don't care about that stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a lesson learned. So I'm like, okay, we're never buying near a cemetery again. And so, it's the other thing is like, in terms of, so that's like economic obsolescence, right? So in terms of like homes, I look at like, okay, I need a backyard, especially when you're in these luxury neighborhoods. They want to see at least half an acre. So if you end up buying a house with 10,000 square feet of lot, chances are they're not going to buy your home. The other thing I do is I'll talk to like a top producing agent in that neighborhood, and I'll be like, what do you see a lot? Like, what do your buyers like to see? And I think that's important too, because a lot of them who are top producing are either holding their own open houses because they want to have their their finger on the pulse. And so these people really know as well, like what you should go after and not go after. So I tend to try to go after homes where, if I walk it with my architect or my structural, where I can do open layouts, because that's really important in our market. If you have kind of a compartmentalized home, buyers aren't really big on that. And here in California, I don't know about Pennsylvania, but here in California, everyone's about the green. We want the tankless water heater, and we want, the insulated pipes, and all these like, green things. So that's a really big thing out here in California that we focus on, and it's good. I mean, it's good to have that. Sometimes it can get taken a little too far, but for the most part, it's a good thing to have out here. But yeah, those are kind of the things I focus on with homes, is how can I, functionality is big. And if I can change the functionality, a lot of times it's not even worth it, because it ends up being so expensive, especially from a structural standpoint, that it's not worth it to us.
Understood.
Foundation and all that stuff doesn't scare me. It's really boils down to lot size, functionality. Yeah, I think, and as long as the pest report's not in the six figures, we'll go after it.
In terms of price, right? Some people use different formulas. Sometimes I agree with the formula. Sometimes it doesn't apply because I know the market and it's just different. But do you use any specific percentage that on the purchase price, and then you calculate your rehab? But what are your criteria in terms of purchase, rehab? Your rehab does not exceed the purchase price, or you really don't care, or how do you connect all the dots?
So I do it based on my spreadsheet, which I pretty much live off of those. But how I run my numbers is, I guess the easiest way to just explain it is, I want to see, nowadays I need to be more realistic, because when I started, I was seeing 110% of my money back. Nowadays it's more like, 60, 70, 80% of your money back, which is great. I do tend to be very conservative, and that's why a lot of people out here trust me, because they know if I say no to a deal, it's probably because she's way too conservative, or this is like a bad deal. The other thing, like some investors will look at their spreadsheets and they look at based on not what their money back is, but what the actual numbers show. And so if the actual numbers, if we look at it from that standpoint, then I want to see at least a 17% or higher, which means I will receive 60 to 70% cash on cash. But with a lot of investors and a lot of my, colleagues out here, they're happy with 10% and making, 30, 40, 50% on their cash, which is great. I'm just a little bit more weary because this market just seems so bizarre to me. The fact that it's been going for so long, which is kind of unprecedented in our time. So, I mean, I hope it continues, but at some point, we have to be real about cycles and, so I try to stay in things that are where I think, okay, like worst case scenario, there's a 25% market hit. I'm still going to be in the green. Whereas when we had the lull here in the Bay Area, I know investors who lost, 6 figures.
Wow.
And that is my worst nightmare. So the Bay Area is very volatile. So, you're making a lot of money, or you will definitely lose a lot of money. So I try to be I have my numbers very padded, really padded. Probably annoying to most people, to be honest, but because you miss out on deals when you're that conservative too.
I was just going to say that what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because I think it's something in a lot of people's back of their minds right now in terms of acquisition, right? They want to keep, the ball rolling. They want to buy property, but they have this thought. I mean, I've had the thought too, like, worst case scenario, what does this look like if the market crashes or kind of repeat 2008, 2009? So when you underwrite your deals, you are underwriting your deals as though, like, do you actually put a line item in there? Like, okay, do you go back to that year, right? 2008. I know Andressa and I were, really Andressa was the helm of really evaluating this major project we were going to get into. And she, I know, you did a lot of research on Andressa on that.
Yeah.
And you were like, this is how this area fared during the 08, 09 crash. But that's really a conversation that people are having right now, right? Because that's especially if you're taking on risk. And this is like not just one deal. This is going to be like 20 to 30, new home construction. So for you, is that part of some of your kind of conservativeness? Okay. So you're like, okay, how did this area fare? And I think that's something we all need to be doing in the women listening. If you're buying property right now and you're renovating it, you should see, go back. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big thing for me. Like, one of the reasons we went luxury is because when I was looking at Hillsborough and the other luxury markets during the crash, I mean, you look at every chart and it looks like, I know I'm from California, but it looks like, an earthquake, it's like up and down and up and down.
Right.
Then you go to an area like a luxury market and it's just this little line kind of going downwards. And you're like, wow, okay. So this didn't really affect them at all. And a lot of it's because these people have money. Okay. So that's one. The second thing is, we're also switching gears to kind of go multifamily because, God forbid if there is a crash again, at least with a multifamily, I have all these people paying my rent. And if, 2 or 3 people in that building lose their jobs, I still have all these other people, paying. Whereas with single family homes, and this was a big thing in California, I knew people who owned 15, 16 single family homes. Those people lost their jobs. Oh. It was impossible to get anyone to rent at that time. And they foreclosed on 15 or 16 20 homes. And so that's a lesson I learned during the crash too, by watching other investors is I know a lot of investors who do incredible with single family home investment. I just, for me, I think it's a little scary. I'd rather go multifamily if I'm going to be a landlord. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, definitely look at the charts from when the market crashed, because you'd be shocked kind of the data you get. I mean, in San Francisco, for example, the housing market during 2008 went down 27%, but then the condo market only went down 17%, which would be the opposite of anyone's thinking, right? But when you're in big cities, I mean, that's, people don't want to commute, and that's their opportunity to kind of move into that city. And so they went for condos.
Wow.
So it's kind of neat to look at that. I just love data so much because we all get wrapped, like, with the stock market and real estate, people get wrapped up in emotion, and emotion doesn't tell you anything. It's fear, it's fear based, or it's greed based. So we get super excited, and it's like, no. Let's just stick with the bottom line. Let's just look at these numbers, because they tell you everything you need to know. It's complete truth and fact. There's no hiding anything there.
Exactly. It's the data there that, will either tell you, hey, red flag, or go ahead, green light.
Yeah. There's no emotion, I've had investors like I've mentored who called me when they're like 2 months from their project ending, and they're calling me and they're on the ledge, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to lose money. Why did I do this? I'm like, time out. Open your computer, look at your spreadsheet. What does your spreadsheet say? Okay. All right. You're right. It says I'm going to make X amount of dollars. Okay. Why are you getting emotional? Why are you freaking out?
You're doing everything you can to,
It's just, it's natural. People just get so wrapped up. They can't help themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also when you have private investors into the deal and you want to make them whole, you respect that, you want to build that relationship, you kind of like, you get overwhelmed, but if you got to the deal, and you start questioning a lot of things, maybe a little bit more due diligence and homework should have been done before. And that's why
yes,
I'm totally conservative when it comes down to getting into it, because I want to play worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, I'm still good. Okay, let's go. And as you said, I had to say no to a lot of other deals, which is painful and it really sucks.
Yeah.
Because you're like, right? But it is what it is. Other deals are going to come, and then we're going to move forward. One thing that I want to kind of transition with you is that you said that you love real estate so much that it becomes, you don't feel that you are working. And Liz and I always talked about this quote unquote balance. And we're not talking about, something linear or something equal between personal and professional. We're not talking about something equal 50-50. Balance for me might look different than what balance for other people. And we respect that. For you, how do you balance things out and fulfill, your personal needs, your soul, and what you care about?
I love that Liz was saying she went running this morning. Like for me, I exercise a lot. It clears my mind. It takes away that angst, that anxiety, that stress, because it's intense when you have, currently I have about 8 million in acquisitions and over $1 million of investor money. So, there's some nights some nights I sleep like a baby, and other nights I'm always worried, and so how do I combat that? Because it's not so much the day-to-day work. It's that when you're at nighttime, when you're winding down and you're thinking about everything on your plate.
Yeah.
And that's why I love writing things out. Cause then when it's swimming in your mind, it's so big, but then when you put it on paper, you're like, oh, it's just a task I can take over. Mm-hmm. And exercise has been really, I'm really into spin. I like intense things. So, spin class, I love lifting really heavy. For me, it's like kind of this meditative.
Good for you.
Yeah, I love it. Like it's, I actually just started up again 2 months ago, which has been great. And then, I think it's easy to lose yourself. Since October, I've lost about 26 pounds, and it's because I just got so wrapped up in, and it happens to all of us women. It happens to everyone, period. You just get wrapped up in your head, and you got to come out of it. And so exercise has really been something that said, hey, it just kind of clears your mind. Another thing I love doing is just spontaneous road trips, or hanging out with my girlfriends or guy friends and, grabbing a margarita and some tacos. It's just those little things in life. So just simple things. Also a huge animal lover. So, I love to help animals and rescue them and take care of them. So those are kind of things that balance me out a little bit. And of course, family, most important thing is having a loving, supporting family is huge.
Great.
Dan, I love what you're saying. it's funny because I haven't worked out for the last few days. My son has been sick and my daughter's had things. It's just been, I can't just, just been hard the last few days. And I'm like, I need to go do something this morning. So I got up extra early, and which I normally do. And I usually work, but I'm like, no, I need to go run this morning. And it's funny you're saying about the what's in our head, because I think that stops a lot of us, right? We have a lot swarming out in our head. At least I do. And then I go to bed thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it. I know Andres has been really diligent with meditating, which I do and I don't, and I go on and off. So for you, but for you, when you have all this stuff swarming in your head, I think that's a common thing, especially for women. I know men have their own stuff, but we're not really serving men. We're serving women with our podcast. So when all this stuff is swarming in your head and you write it out, do you have anything that you do, like a strategy? Do you just write everything that's in your head? Do you make a to-do list? I don't know. I'm curious. What do you do to actually release all the monkey mind, they call it, in your head? Because I think it stops a lot of us, and it's always going to be with us. So I'm curious what you do when you say you write it out. I'm curious what you do.
I know the number one thing that it's like what stops us, right? And a lot of times when I talk to other women, they're feeling overwhelmed, and then that could make them feel depressed or sad. And so I think with me, what I've done to combat that is, again, I do think when it's swimming in your head and we go to bed with it, we wake up with it, like you said, how do we combat that? And so a lot of times I do love to-do lists. I know it sounds crazy, but honestly, when you have this thing swimming in your head and you're letting it swim there for so long, you're giving it power. And why do we give this thing power? It's not, we're way better than it, and we can totally take it down. I mean, it's kind of what you were saying in the beginning. It's like, we have this track record of always doing things a certain way. You just have to we lose confidence when we let these things take us over. And so I know it sounds crazy, but I literally write to-do lists, and then I go, okay, that is a lot. I'm going to validate that. That is a lot. I acknowledge that. But you know what? I can tackle this. I mean, look at my track record. Look what I've done. And, I think a lot of women just need to look at what they've accomplished in their life, whether it's a marathon or, they were promoted, or, they're a mom, or, whatever it is. You have to look at yourself and think, I got this. And when you start checking it off, I mean, I like to put lines, strike the lines through it. It's like, okay, 1 down, 10 to go. The other thing is I always whisper this in my mind. It's like day by day. You're not going to take over the world in a day. And I'm so impatient and type A that I constantly am like, I need to be doing more. Why am I so stuck? Why am I so stagnant? I need to be doing more. Oh my God, what's my problem? So-and-so is doing this, and so-and-so is doing that.
Yeah. And you go on Facebook and you're like, oh my God, you built 15 businesses by the age of 30 and you have 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like shit. That's great. I feel like I'm useless. That's awesome.
When I get quiet time, and I'm always like, okay, I accomplished my to-do list. Now I have this quiet time. And then the next thought is, what am I missing? I should be producing something. This is a freaking waste of my time. Why am I not doing something? Other people are doing millions of things.
Right.
Why am like relaxing here?
Yeah.
This is like a constant struggle. It's just like, oh geez.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think comparing ourselves to others is the worst thing we can do. And then sometimes, I know some of us can be overcritical of ourselves. And I think sometimes that can act as rocket fuel, but I think other times it can be very debilitating, depending on your inner monologue.
Inner monologue.
I think I think it's good to acknowledge. It's good to acknowledge what you need to get done, but don't beat yourself up about it, because we have no idea about other people's backgrounds. Maybe they built those 15 businesses because they were a trust fund baby and they didn't care about risk or money, or
right.
We just never know what people's backgrounds are. Or I'll meet people who are incredibly successful, but they lost everything, or they don't have anything, or they just have a very humble kind of idea about life. And we just never know. We just never know anyone's full story. We just kind of see, like you said, we see this image on Facebook and then we think, oh, why am I, and I always say Facebook is the worst place to look.
Yeah, it is. No, you're absolutely right. I love what you're saying. I love that, you said a lot of really, really helpful things, but taking your power back. And by getting stuff out of our head, how do we take the power back to ourselves? How do we get the power back? Right. And I think that's a great question to leave the women listening to this is, every day, we allow our power to be released, and not in a good way, releasing meaning like release to the world, but like we just allow to give it up versus taking it back. And I love what you're saying, like getting it out of your head, right? I mean, as simple as the writing the to-do list, there's so many things on time management and life management, but literally getting it out of your head and being like, I got this day by day is like, if you do that, you're going to feel better, so awesome stuff. Diana, we can probably talk to you for like another couple hours. This is amazing. But we want to be mindful of our time, as we all are. But where can the women listening to our show learn more about you and all the great development projects and work you're doing? And you just have a really neat business. So how can the ladies learn more about you?
Oh, thank you. So you can like check out our current projects and before and afters at www.investwithartemis.com. And then we have at Artemis Investments is our Instagram handle. And then we have a Facebook page, Artemis Investments. So but our website definitely has, blogs and up-to-date projects and before and afters, and people love that.
Awesome.
So we have, and then with our next project that we're breaking ground in 3 weeks, we're going to be having a video crew kind of following us from start to finish. That's going to be fun to kind of see that transformation. Yeah.
I love
that's going to be fun. Yeah.
Great. And all of this information you can find on our show notes. Now we're going to transition to our fabulous 3 questions. Are you ready, Diana?
Yes.
All right. The first one is...
Ready or not?
I'm coming. The first one is, what's the most transformational book you have ever read?
Definitely Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that book.
The second question, what's the most powerful routine you do to create a financially free and balanced life?
Definitely has to be exercising. I think that just balances my head, clears my head. I feel like when you burn out, you're no good to anyone, including yourself. And so that's what keeps me from burning out.
Love that. And which women, famous or not, has inspired you the most?
You're right. That one was hard. I think definitely my mom, because she came here like not even knowing the language.
Where did she raise from?
She came from Baghdad, Iraq, and they were Christians. And when Saddam took power, they left. My dad actually proposed to her in like a letter 4 years later, and then she flew to the States, married my dad. My brother and I were born in Chicago. But her whole thing was like, she wanted to raise us. She didn't want strangers raising us. And I think, I have friends who are moms now that they love being at home with their kids, and others of them are like, oh God, no, I need to go to work. So it just depends, but she was one of those that just really liked being with us. And then I don't know why. And then when we got into elementary, like late elementary school, like 5th and 4th grade, she took ESL classes.
Wow.
And then
which is English as a second language.
Yes. Yeah. And then did AA, got her AA, and then went back to cosmetology school, and then got a medical license doing like estheticianing, and now she's owned her business for 20 years.
Wow.
So she was just, for me as a girl growing up, like, wow, just incredibly fierce, very loving. I always call her the lion, because she's a very loving mom, but she's also very, like, don't mess with my kids type of thing. Even when my brother and I were wrong, she'd stick up for us in public, but then behind the scenes, we'd get a good old smack. So, but I admire and love that about her. So, definitely she was very inspiring for me. And also my aunt was very inspiring too. She's pretty incredible. So yeah, I've been blessed to have like really strong women in my family. And then I guess like, and then every day just watching women like you guys and Anna Myers and, even in our own community, just Kathy Fetke, like that to me is like that's incredibly inspiring to me. So, because, we don't see a lot of women kind of trailblazing, which is in our industry. And it's really cool to start seeing more and more of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We interview both of them and we're going to add their link for
that's a great idea
on the show notes.
Yeah.
Because they're just so inspiring people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's really cool.
Well, we appreciate you so much, Diana, being on our show and sharing your amazing insight and just opening up to all the women listening and to us. And I obviously always love to take notes because I always learn things. So I'm like, take your power back. So that is what my big takeaway is amongst all the other wonderful things you said. So thank you for being on our show and thanks for being.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. You guys are great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Diana.
All right. You guys take care. Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to receive updates on our next interviews, go to our website, therealestateinvestor.com. There, you can subscribe to our show, become part of our investor community, and get updates on upcoming episodes.
If you like our show, please share it with other women who would benefit. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, we encourage you to take one action as a result of today's show and put it into motion so you can live both a financially free and balanced life. Thanks for spending time with us.
Ciao.